let's catch up and do a February reading wrap up. Hello, book friends. It's Alyssa. Welcome back to the channel. Hello, if you are new. I hope you can't hear my laundry going in the background, but you may be able to. If I don't record now, I will never be able to record. So we're just going to jump into it. I have a dry rosé cider. It is a Wednesday evening after work. We're going to crack into this. And we're going to review the books I read in February. Per usual, we'll go through my Storygraph stats and then we will look at all the books I read over on my Bookly, chat about them, and yeah, have a good time, I guess, maybe. I don't know what I'm saying. It was a long day at work. I'm trying to figure out filming schedules and organizing my life, and I feel like this has happened so many times over like the 5 years that I've been on BookTube, because I've changed jobs a couple times now, or roles within jobs, etc., etc. So it's been a really interesting having to pivot again, is what I think I'm trying to say. But that is not what this video is about. Let's talk about the books. Make sure you're subscribed, like the video, share this with a friend, do all that stuff, you know, support the channel, blah, blah, blah. Mercy's roaming. Let's just talk about the books. In the month of February, I read 13 books, which was 4,318 pages. It took me about 5 days to finish a book, and I'm so excited to see that number come down from January, because that was insane. That reading challenge was unnecessary, and I will never be participating in something that crazy ever again. My moods were fairly typical for me. Reflective, mysterious, emotional, sad, informative. There was some funny closer to the top, which is not normal, but maybe that means I'm broadening my horizons. Who knows? Pace was perfectly evenly split, which is kind of amazing, between fast, slow, and medium. Didn't know that could actually happen. My average page count is basically under 500 pages. No chunky books were finished in February. I think that that's fair after my January and December reads. My nonfiction fiction split for February is 8% nonfiction and 92% fiction. I anticipate more nonfiction coming in throughout the year. I feel like this is typical, where I just kind of have this slow ramp up, and then later in the year I read more and more nonfiction. My genres, not a big spread on my genre list, actually. So tops are classics, literary, historical, LGBTQ, and mystery. And my average rating for February was 3.88 stars, which is kind of nice. I have one book I really didn't like, and then I mostly enjoyed everything I read. Some of them more than others, but it was a pretty good reading month. It's not so bad. Let's see what I actually read. So let's head over to my Bookly and take a look at every book I read in February. I nearly forgot. I did DNF one book in February, and we'll get to that shortly. So, starting off, these, I don't know what order these end up being in on my Bookly. So, the first book we're going to talk about is I Will Repay by Baroness Orczy. I never know how to say her name. This is the lady who wrote The Scarlet Pimpernel. This is another story in the world of The Scarlet Pimpernel. This is a little later on, I think, from the original story. It is not good, okay? I would not recommend. Please do not read this. I just have this omnibus of Scarlet Pimpernel stories that I'm going to get through sort of sporadically throughout the year, just for S's and G's. And I did enjoy... Okay, so I would have stopped reading this because the plot is just so silly. Basically, like, it opens with this girl, her brother has been killed in a duel, and she vows to her father that on his deathbed that she will avenge her brother's death or something like that. And then later, the guy who kills her brother happens to also be somebody who's like part of the whole like French Revolution, and like she somehow runs into him she hates him. She tries to make good on her vow to her father on his deathbed, and she rats him out to like the tribunal or whatever. And he, like, no sooner does she like drop the letter in the mailbox than she decides that she's actually in love with him. And oh no, what did she do? And it's just the whole setup for the story is stupid. But I only continued reading just to see how the Scarlet Pimpernel would get them out of the mess that they've gotten themselves into. And it was interesting from that perspective, because it just doesn't make any sense as like as a rescue, but it was kind of fun to see this over the top rescue. I don't recommend, you don't need to read. Next, I really loved this book. So this is The Long View by Elizabeth Jane Howard. I first read about this in, I'm never going to remember the name of this book. I always forget it. The Lives of the Wives. I still have it right behind me, so thank God. It talked about Elizabeth Jane Howard and her husband, and in that it talked about this book. And what intrigued me was that this is a story of a marriage that's falling apart, and we go backwards through time to see how the marriage began, and we slowly see it. We slowly rewind through how it unraveled, and we see some of the really big betrayals that happened to our main character that lead her to enter into this relationship with her current husband. It was witty. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed this. This was such a surprise to me. I didn't really know what I was going to get. One of the things that I learned in February and some of March is that I kind of have this little love affair brewing with mid-century female authors, or at least I'm finding a bunch that I'm enjoying at the moment, and I plan to make like a little recap video of some of the books that I've been reading and enjoying that are mid-century gems. A lot of them are in this wrap-up, so you'll see them here, but in case people don't like watching wrap-ups or specifically looking for mid-century gems, there will be a little video just kind of gushing about them. But I really love this. I encourage you to read it, and I would like to read something else from Elizabeth Jane Howard. I'm not sure what, so if you are familiar with her works and think there's a great place to go from here, because I feel like this may be different than what she usually writes or usually wrote. So, and I could be wrong on that, but yeah, let me know if you have recs for her. Moving on. I read To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf and absolutely adored it. I just think there's so much mastery in this book. It's split into 3 parts. It opens with the Ramseys at this house they're somewhere like on the Isle of Skye or something like that. It reads like Cornwall. I thought it was Cornwall because I think that's where Virginia Woolf's family had their little summer house. And anyway, it's not Cornwall. But you open with the Ramseys and their friends. They have this little house and they are all existing in this kind of vacation. And there's this lighthouse that they're planning to go to, but they never quite make it there in part 1. There's this fantastic dinner scene. It's a very internal story. You're jumping kind of from head to head, and seeing how our characters think and how they think about each other, and maybe the things that they're not sharing with the outside world, they're sharing with us. And then you jump into part 2, which is like this whirlwind part where Wolf just thrusts you through time, and you go through World War I and a bunch of other stuff, and things happen to the characters that you met in the first part, and then you come out the other side and you enter part 3, and now you're sort of in the aftermath. You're in this processing of the people that have been lost, the things that have happened, the war, family dynamics. It's so good. This might be one of my new favorites from Woolf. I'm not really sure what I'm going to read next from her, but I adored this, and I highly encourage you to read it if you are at all interested in reading Virginia Woolf. The Feast by Margaret Kennedy is another mid-century gem that I just have to highlight in its own little mid-century gem video, because this was phenomenal. This is a rather well-known story from the late 40s, early 50s. It's set in like 1949 on I think this is on the Cornish coast. But anyway, it's in coastal Britain somewhere. And there's this big house that used to be like a big family house, and you're at this shifting of dynamics in the society post World War II, and you see how this family, this formerly well-to-do family, is now shifting their home into like a hotel, and the struggles they're having. Plus, then you have all these guests coming, and then right at the beginning of the story, you learn that there's this horrible tragedy that happens, where the entire house and several of the people that were in it are just killed in this landslide. Like the house is gone, the coast has changed, certain people are gone, and certain people survive. And then you launch into the days leading up to this tragic event, and you meet all these people and you see how they interact, and you get to see like class clashes, people looking at how certain people survived the war. What did certain people have to deal with? What could certain people avoid because they were wealthy? Looking at people's lives now post-war. There's a lot of discussion of like just equity in terms of society and who deserves certain things and who doesn't. It's so good. And there's like gender politics a little bit. It's a really, really wonderful, wonderful read. And this particular edition is from McNally. I love the McNally Jackson editions. It's a small imprint, and they do some really interesting books that they bring back from out of print and reprint. And this is definitely a winner from their collection. So I highly recommend them as a small indie press. Teaching White Supremacy by Donald Yakovone. This is a nonfiction book all about how our textbooks have been written and the way race and history has been portrayed in American textbooks, and how that influences racism and the rise of white supremacy, or the continuation of white supremacy. It is a really hard read. There were a lot of sections that were really difficult to get through. It's also kind of eye-opening in a lot of ways. I feel like I have a better understanding of maybe why generations like my parents' generation hold certain things to be true so firmly, because some of these ideas really went well into the 60s in our school textbooks. And so they weren't learning anything different. It also shows you kind of how easy it is to indoctrinate or shift and shape narratives, historical narratives, to suit the governing bodies' thoughts, desires, needs, agendas, etc. Definitely a really important read, particularly today, as we're like gutting our education system more than I ever thought you could gut our education system, because it's pretty terrible here in the US as it is. But yeah, important read, hard read, especially when you get into some of the later chapters that talk about lynching. It still boggles my mind that there is no federal law against lynching in this country. But I highly encourage you to read this. If you're at all interested in this topic, I would read this. There's an entire vlog of me reading Call Me By Your Name. I'm not going to go too much into this. It was really mid for me. This was a viewer's choice. The next viewer's choice is going to be A Tale of Two Cities, which I am filming now. If you don't know what that is, this year I've started doing a thing where like once a month I post a short reel, whatever, all over my socials, asking you to pick a number between 1 and whatever the number is currently on my owned library list. And I then randomly pick one of those numbers and use that to choose something at random from the shelves to read, vlog, and either I love it or I get rid of it. Because yeah, there's too many books and I'm never going to get through them all, and I kind of need to be forced to probably read some of these. So this is helping me get through those. By the way, I've gotten several comments about how I don't look into the camera, and I'm trying really hard. I just want you to know it's very hard for me to make eye contact. But I'm working on it. Okay. Moving on. We don't need to talk anymore about Call Me By Your Name. If you want to watch the vlog, go right ahead. I'll try to remember to link it down below. I read another Barbara Pym, and this is Jane and Prudence, another mid-century gem for you, if you will. I just think Barbara Pym in general creates really lovely, almost Austen-esque in her dialogue and her wit, stories of kind of manners and women and the church, I guess, as well, in England in like the 50s in particular, just post-war. And it captures this time very beautifully. And the writing is quite witty. And I really enjoy the exchanges our characters have. Jane and Prudence is particularly interesting because I feel like these women have so much more depth to them than perhaps society will allow them. Particularly the one who's married to the like vicar person. I think it's Jane. It's been a bit since I've read this, but one of the women is married to a clergyman of sorts, and then another woman is like an independent woman working for, she's got a little apartment. She's working for this doctor. I think she does like editing of his papers or something like that. They're both highly educated women. And one's life is all about her husband, and she's not very good at it. And the other one's life is all about herself and her own pleasures, desires, intellectually desires. She's more intellectually stimulated. Her interactions with people are kind of more intellectually stimulating. Okay, sorry, camera problems. I have to admit that I don't understand all the dynamics of high church, low church, all of that in like the Church of England and everything else that Pym sort of focuses on in a lot of her stories in the background. I don't get all of that. It's not part of my cultural understanding, but I do enjoy the way her characters interact and the women in her stories and the wit and just kind of the feeling of reading them. They make me happy. They are breaths of fresh air and I enjoy it. And then we come to my DNF, and that is All Fours by Miranda July. I did listen to this. I did not read along. I did not read it physically in any way. And I did DNF it quite early. I made it about 111 pages in, and I just couldn't get into it at all. I found the narrator very annoying. I didn't care. I thought she was kind of crazy and over the top and not in a fun way. It felt like rich white women shit that I just didn't care about. And I stopped. Life's too short. My friends this past weekend were explaining to me the plot of the book, and at no point while they were explaining to me the bits after I read, like, further on, and at no point was I like, oh, I really should have picked this up. This sounds really great. Maybe I'll go back to it. No, never. I was like, thank you for being smart enough to DNF this, because this was not for me. So I know a lot of people love it, but I am not she. I did enjoy Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fieto. I don't think either of those are right. It's a little novella. It's very murderous. It's set in Victorian times, as one might expect. And it's a governess, and she has entered this house, and she's quite off. And eventually it ends with lots of murder and rampaging and good times. And it was just fun. It was just a good time. It was just fun. I do want to read her other novel, Mrs. March or Miss March. She's got like the gloves on the cover. I do want to try that. I'm very curious to see what else she has written and if I will enjoy that as well. But yeah, I don't have a lot to say about this. It was just a stabby good time. I did read Sylvia Townsend Warner's Lolly Willows and was really middle of the road on it. I didn't dislike it. I kind of like what she was trying to do with it. I don't know if the magical realism elements worked. I liked the sort of proto-feminism of it. I liked having a narrative about a woman who is older and is finding her independence outside of her family in a world where women really didn't have independence of any sort and they couldn't live independently. If they weren't married, they were they were expected to live with and keep house for another male relative in their lives, father, brother, whatever. And I just I liked kind of what it was doing, but I don't know if the way it was executed did anything for me. But I can appreciate how when it was written, this may have been a very forward-thinking and surprising novel. I think that Virginia Woolf does these things better, but she is writing after Sylvia Townsend Warner, so perhaps she's influenced by her. I'm not sure, but if there's another Townsend Warner that I should read, please let me know, because I'm interested to see if maybe I like other things that she writes, maybe without the magical realism. That kind of felt like it came out of left field. It was a little... It could have been incorporated better from the beginning so that so it made more sense to me as a reader. But anyway, Written on the Body by Jeanette Winterson. I absolutely adore this book. This is a book with like a genderless narrator who has fallen in love with this married woman and their relationship and how it all kind of falls apart, and the obsession and the love and the it's very poetic and lyrical, and a lot of the ruminations our narrator has on their love for this woman are just, they're beautiful, but they're also like desperate. And I really love this, and I have two more. This made me buy two more Jeanette Winterson books to try out. I don't know what they are. I think I have the orange ones. Oranges aren't the only fruit or something like that. And I have another one that I found while thrifting, but I loved this so much. Another love is A Treacherous Curse. This is the third, I believe, in the Veronica Speedwell series by Deanna Raybourn. This is set in Victorian times, like late Victorian, I think, and it is just a rip-roaring good time. It's like a mystery romance. We have the greatest banter between Stoker and Veronica. I cannot wait for the slow burn to stop slow burning and to finally like them to just admit how much they love each other. This is great. This one has more like Egyptology in it, so it's got a different vibe than the other two. It was fun. It was a good time. I don't want to say too much because there's like the little plots of each book, and then there's a bigger overarching plot that involves Veronica, her past, her parentage, Stoker, his past, and then of course their relationship as it slowly blossoms across the series. But I highly recommend these. I do need to read another one soon. Moving on. My Death by Lisa Tuttle. This is a tiny little novella. Again, I think with like some magical realism, maybe fantasy. It's very speculative, I think is probably a better word for it. I did enjoy this. It felt a bit abrupt because it is so short. I kind of wanted a little bit more extrapolation in a few areas just to maybe explain some more things. But basically we have this woman who is grieving, and she becomes obsessed with writing a biography of this author, artist woman who happens to still be alive. She ends up interviewing her. They share some memories, and she starts to question how she and this woman have shared memory. There's this island and some weird stuff that happens there. It's interesting. It's definitely worth reading. I'm curious about what else Lisa Tuttle has written, but I do wish this could have been fleshed out just a little bit more, like maybe another 30, 40 pages, and I think it would have been perfection. Mutual Interest by Olivia Wolfgang Smith. I got this from Bloomsbury because the comps for this were wild. It was like Hernan Diaz's Trust, Ian Forrester, somebody else, and I was like, how is this book going to live up to any of that? And it doesn't, shockingly. I should have DNF'd this, but I just kind of needed to know where it was going to go. I was very much on board through the first half, and then you get to this interlude, and then the things I was enjoying about the third person narration became tedious. The story, the pacing was kind of off in the second half for me. I felt like, I can't remember any of the characters' names, but there is a lavender marriage in this, and I feel like the woman in this, she's a lesbian, her husband's gay, lavender marriage, and they set up home with his lover, which they consider his husband, and they have like this secret passage so they can share a room, whatever. I feel like they end up kind of doing her a little bit dirty. and maybe doing her a little bit dirty is strong, but I feel like she really lucks out in this. And I feel like they don't really have any, there's just tension that's missing. And I'm not saying that we necessarily needed to have a narrative where like bad things happen to queer people, but I feel like they're in a world that's like Gilded Age New York. And there's supposed to be this fear of being found out as queer. I felt like there wasn't enough tension around that. And it was too easy for these men. It was just too easy for them. And a lot of it had to do with money. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it. And then there was like some weird phrasing around somebody's erection that really got me. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm reading anymore. So yeah, they were wild comps that I knew that this book could never live up to, and it didn't. I feel like it's getting a decent amount of marketing or like pre-marketing because I've seen it in a bunch of places, but I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it, which is always an interesting thing to see in the book world when they like push a book out quite a bit. And then there's just kind of radio silence. That's always just like an interesting sign. But yeah, that is everything I read in February. So going into March, I cannot recall what I held over, but I believe I held over The Group by Mary McCarthy, which I will talk about in my mid-century gems. The Custom of the Country by Edith Wharton, which is the current read that we are doing for my year with Edith Wharton. I'm behind a little bit on posting updates for the reading process. Like I said in the beginning, I'm getting myself used to a new schedule. So I will get that up soon for the first chunk of reading for that. Cushelle's Dart by Jacqueline Carey, which is a fantasy from like the 90s, I think, that is very sexy and very good. I did finish that in March. I think I held that over. And of course, I held over The Magic Mountain and A Backwards Glance, which is Edith Wharton's autobiography. The only ones I'm still reading are The Magic Mountain. And I will eventually finish that in March. But anyway, that is everything. I'm going to stop recording before I run out of disk space again. But I appreciate you guys watching. I would appreciate hearing your thoughts on any of the books that I read, or giving me any recommendations based on the books that I read and enjoyed, or maybe based on the books I read and didn't enjoy, if that helps you formulate a recommendation. Remember to support the channel if you enjoyed this. So like, subscribe, all that. I think that's all I got. So thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want. Bye.